Hi, I'm Robert Ginyard, your host of the Intentionally Overheard podcast.
And I'm Tonia Magras, host of the PowerPLAY show. I am so excited about my show this week because we have something very special coming up.
It will be special because after 34 years, I'm sitting down with my friend to catch up on a special co-production, Where We Left Off.
Yep, after all this time, Rob and I will discuss where we met, how our lives have transpired over the decades, and where we are now. So join us for a special co-production of Intentionally Overheard and the PowerPLAY show this week, wherever you subscribe to podcasts, including iTunes, iHeartRadio, and Pandora Podcasts.
Or you can watch our special by visiting the Whole Bay Productions channel's YouTube page. That's Where We Left Off this week on Intentionally Overheard.
And on the PowerPLAY show at thepowerplayshow.com.
From the studios at Whole Bay Productions, this is the PowerPLAY.
Welcome to the PowerPLAY. I am Tonia Magras.
And welcome to Intentionally Overheard. I am Robert Ginyard.
This is so exciting, Robert, because what we're doing today is we have like what we call a co-production, because this is going to air on the PowerPLAY show and it's going to air on your podcast as well.
And, Tony, I'm so excited about it. And, we had talked about this for a while, and just to see this come to fruition has been a blessing. And, and we'll talk about it a little later on, but there's just the reconnection is nothing but the good works of the Lord and just the good energy that you put out. So I'm excited.
I'm very excited, but I want to just start. I'm going to put my little reporter hat on. Tell our audience about Intentionally Overheard. What is it?
Sure. Intentionally Overheard was birthed out of the many occasions, Tony, where I would eavesdrop on people to a certain degree. When I used to sell real estate years ago, my satellite office, like many real estate agents' office, was the local Starbucks. And I would sit in Starbucks and hear all of these conversations. And, it initially started out as, okay, I overheard that. But if it was good, Tony, I really overheard it. And so it was intentional. And so that's how Intentionally Overheard came to be. It was a reflection back on those times where I would sit in the cafe and hear these wonderful stories, some bad ones mixed in every now and then, but some juicy ones as well. And I always learned so much after leaving the cafe, and sometimes, Tony, when the conversation was getting really good, although I finished my coffee maybe about 15 or 20 minutes ago, I'd go get that 53-cent refill and sit down and listen to the rest. So that's the story behind Intentionally Overheard. Now, I guess I would flip that back on and put my reporter hat on. Tell me about the PowerPLAY.
Yeah, the PowerPLAY was kind of a dream of mine that I was born out of conversations I would have with my stepdad, retired district court judge Sevelin Singleton. And what was interesting about that is that, Sevy and I would often have these really kind of long, drawn out debates, if you will, on various issues, whether it was around law. So when I was fired from a position and I said, okay, well, what am I going to do next? And I decided I really want to do a podcast. I had spent at least 30 years behind the scenes, producing, directing, editing, making everybody else's voice sound good. And I was like, well, I want my own voice. And so this was an opportunity where we could come together, we could talk about some issues, we could invite some guests on, talk about some larger issues. And then, my stepdad's retired, so he wanted to kind of go off and do his own project. So he left me holding the bag, if you will. But okay. No, I'm kidding. It's all good love. But so this is really just a time and a space for me where I can meet people. I can have really interesting conversations about really, really important issues. And I just love it. I'm having the best time of my life.
Well, and Tony, what's interesting is you talked about how you helped other people use their voice and tell their stories. And I just want to make sure that, folks out there know on my side of the podcast world that Toni brings a wealth of experience, and she's been Emmy Award winning, and just about any award that's out there for communication and telling stories. So you have latched on to something that's beautiful, and I think it really is an extension of you and what your life's purpose is about. And so, and I know we talked about this, and we're going to get to that, but let's tell people about how we met, Toni.
Well, we were some very, very younger, thinner, probably less confident people. We met at the University of Miami in Florida, and I was class of 90. Were you 89?
Well, no, I was supposed to be 88.
Okay, all right. And
yeah.
I was supposed to be 90, so we can kind of start the conversation there, right? Yeah, I mean, it was, I stepped, so my mom brought me down, which was fantastic. And I stepped foot into Pearson Hall, which is where I lived, I guess. Yeah. And I didn't know what to expect, but I was immediately overwhelmed. And my mom was like across US 1, huge highway that separated the university from like all the stores and the strip malls and everything. And I remember walking over to her hotel at like 10:30 at night and just crawled into the bed with her. I was terrified. Yeah. And she had to leave because she had to go back to work. And so, yeah, there I was.
Well, now, I was the flip side of that, Toni. Now, when I arrived there, I had a little bit of age on me. At that point, when I came down, I had done 2 years at community college. And then when I came down to Miami, I was 24 at that time. And so, I'd kind of gotten a lot of the youthfulness out of me in terms of, hey, I'm away in another state and, I'm far from Baltimore and let's have some fun. And so I think I came there with a bit more maturity. And I thought I arrived with a certain level of focus, but if you were to look at my GPA during that time, evidently I didn't get the memo. My brain didn't get the memo about focus. But yeah, so it was quite an experience for me, though, of course, to be away from home, but to be down there. And I met so many wonderful people, you included, but it opened up another universe to me, Toni, in that even to this day, I look at that experience in college kind of in general, that it's part of that journey. It's part of learning and getting to know your network. And that's one of the things that I'm really grateful for is, a lot of the folks who were down there at the time that we were, the network has been strong.
Yes,
and
it has.
It's just been such a blessing to see how everyone has kind of fallen into their careers. And at this age, we're all kind of finding that purpose in life. And so that's why it was so good to reconnect with you and just find out what you're doing. And we got to do this, Toni. We've got to acknowledge Billy Abels, because he can track down any and every.
Yes, big shout out to Bill. Yes, he is the author of this, actually. Absolutely.
He is.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
another
Billy
UM friend that we've
another UM friend.
Yeah.
Billy was the Google before Google. He was the Uber before Uber. You name it, he was it.
Yeah.
But tell me a little bit more about the UM experience, because one of the things that I mentioned, Toni, when you mentioned about how overwhelmed you are, when you and I reconnected, I said, Toni, I kind of got that feeling when I would see you down at UM, it wasn't like you didn't want to be there, but it seemed like you had so much on your mind. And I think all of us were trying to figure out who we are or who we were and how do we fit in.
I think that you nailed it. It's the figuring out. And for me, it was just so hard to not have my my surroundings, things that were familiar to me. And I was 17 when I stepped foot on UM.
Okay.
I really hadn't done much in my life. And four flights up from me, I met who became my big brothers. They're still my big brothers today, and that's Maurice Jenkins and Derek Sands. And
Yes.
they really, really kind of took care of me in a way that was very familiar, because, home, I had my big brother David, I had, my cousins around me, I had things that were very, very familiar, and they just made that very, very comfortable for me. I remember, this is a funny story. So they had these intramural games that would happen ever so often. I think they were on Thursday nights or something random. And there was a softball game, and here comes, Tony walking through the field, just, completely clueless about everything that was going on. And I got hit in the back of the head with a baseball. And and I remember Derek kind of like picking me up off of the floor, like only you would have. And I think he had to have a conversation with my mom, and he was like, I don't know what happened. She was walking, and then all of a sudden she was on the floor. She got hit with something. Yeah. But, just having him there, like, what would I have done? I think I had a concussion, because I remember them taking care of me for a couple of days, but what would I have done without them? And that's the kind of thing that made it a little bit better. But for you, what was it? I know that you were a little bit older when you got there, but you must have had some kind of awkward, transitions when you were there.
Yeah, it was awkward in the sense that I really felt like I felt like a grown up, and not so much a child environment, but I was a grown up, and I was trying to, at 24, I was still trying to be the young man, but still, I'm like, man, do I want to enjoy the youthfulness that I see across campus? So I was down there on a mission in terms of finances. I had financial aid and scholarships and all of that. And so I didn't really have a lot of margin to play around a lot. And so to a certain degree, I think that took away from my experience there, because I was thinking, I'm on a time frame. I got to get out, got to keep my grades up. And so it was a different experience. But the other thing is that I realized back then that I was a social butterfly, and I found myself wanting to hear about people's stories and where they came from. And so to be at this international university where people are coming from all parts of the world, there were times, I was in Mahoney dorm and you were in Pearson, so the next one over.
Right.
And so I would sit on the sofas at night and just, somebody would come in and I'm like, hey, I'm Robert Ginyard, who are you? And we'd start these conversations that may begin at around 10 o'clock, Tony, and wind up ending at around 2:30. Yeah. But I would that was, to me, that was kind of an indication. I'm like, you know what? I would really like to do this. And, I was a music major back then. But the communication piece and the storytelling, that's kind of where my heart is. And so all these years later, that's what I'm doing.
That's interesting because, my mom is a retired television producer. So I grew up wanting to tell stories and not really sure how and where. But what I did do is I found myself inventing stories about my life down there because no one knew me. And so I could be anything that I wanted to be, and, people will call it lying. It was my imagination, like, oh my gosh, I have an opportunity right now to be whoever I want to be. and I can create whatever world that, I want to. And I think that that's what helped me define myself in a way, because I was incredibly intimidated by everyone. I remember I would always see you talking to people. That was the one thing I can say about you. Every time I saw Robert, he was talking to someone. And I didn't think of it as a social butterfly. I thought you were just like really, really busy and really, really popular, and everybody was always talking to Robert.
Well, what's interesting, Tony, is after I left, I didn't know so many people had missed me. People kept asking about, where's Bobby Jimmy? And by the way, yes, audience, that was a nickname that they gave me down in Miami, and I have not been able to outrun that. But
we got to take a step back, because we got to talk about why we left. So I'm going to start with you. So, you left UM.
Yes. Well, when I left UM, I was kicked out of UM for not making significant progress as a music student there. As a student, you're required to, of course, keep your academic chops up, but also as a music student, you had to perform, and you had to learn your instrument. And so, Tony, I didn't do it, and so after the first year, I was sent a letter on my way back to Baltimore. Like I said, I don't know. To this day, Federal Express must have worked overtime to get that letter to my house because I drove back from Miami to Baltimore. And so they sent me a Dear Robert letter, basically said, you didn't make some significant progress, and so therefore you're not admitted to return to your university. And so I was devastated that entire summer, and I worked my behind off to audition to come back. Now, all the while, my parents, my friends, nobody knew that I had gotten kicked out. And so I was basically, on my own in terms of making a comeback. I drove back to Miami and waved, to everybody at home saying, okay, I'll see you at the end of the semester. I had no idea whether or not I was going to get accepted or not. And so, so I got to Miami and walked into the one of the student practice rooms where they were holding auditions, and I blew them away. I performed at such a level, Tony, to this day, that experience still helps me in anything that I take on, because I was floating in this zone where I could not make a mistake. And so on the spot, I was admitted back to the university. And, that was my last semester there, because to me, from a faith perspective, that was the lesson I needed to learn from Miami. I did another semester there, but then, it was time to come back home. I wanted to be with my family and study here. And quite frankly, it was cheaper. Yeah. But that experience, in terms of my faith and the way I look back at it now, I needed that experience about getting kicked out and then being readmitted. That was part of what God had for me in terms of growth is concerned. And so that's my story about why I left. Now tell me about what it was that made you leave.
Well, this is kind of very, very interesting, and it's going to give you some goosebumps, but I left on May 5th, and this is the day that we're actually recording this podcast, because on May 4th, I was raped by 4 University of Miami football players. And I was coming home. The library was like way across campus. I remember it's like maybe a 10, 15-minute walk from where the dorms were. And always Maurice and Derek would either come meet me and walk with me or pick me up. And it just so happened that May 4th is Maurice's birthday. So as I was calling them, they were all out celebrating Mo's birthday. And so I just decided to walk. And so that happened. And, I've written about it. I've talked about it. I've healed from it. But I left the next day. I remember, I went to the emergency room and I heard, police officers saying in the background, oh, those crazy hurricanes or those crazy canes or something like that. And I immediately internalized, I'm crazy. Like, what happened to me had to have been my fault, because the police officers were basically mocking the whole situation. So I went home. I think I sat on the floor of the shower for hours and just let the water just kind of hit me, because water's always been something very soothing for me. I grew up in the Virgin Islands, so water's always been something very, very smoothing. And I called my mom the next day and I said, I'm on my way home. And she's like, well, how are you getting there? How are you getting home? And I said, I'm just on my way. And I couldn't tell her over the phone. I couldn't talk to her over the phone. And really didn't end up telling anybody for a really long time. I just kept it to myself. And, there's this space and time between May 4th, 1987, and maybe somewhere around 90 that I just really didn't exist. I think the pain and the torture and the trauma of everything, I really didn't exist. I began drinking a lot and developed an addiction that lasted over 30 years.
Now, what was that conversation like, though, Toni, when you had to tell, mom what happened? What was that conversation like?
I don't remember. Because I was in that space. I do remember having a conversation with my dad, and we have since talked about this, and we have since healed from this. Yeah. But as a dad, and you're a dad, you have two beautiful daughters, and your first thing you want to do is protect, right? And figure things out and make things right. And I think that communication just kind of like freaked me out a little bit more, because, the way it was communicated to me, it was almost an anger, and I internalized it as an anger at me. And really what my dad was just really trying to, like, what happened to my daughter? Like, who would do this to my daughter? I didn't tell Derek and Maurice for years.
Well, and with regards to your dad, and I get it, and I think some of that was probably because as a dad, you want to be there to protect.
Yeah.
And so I know he was feeling something like, did I fail my daughter? Yes. Did I was not there, not to take this to an extreme, but should I have told her, look, you know what, you clubbed somebody upside the head. All of those survival
things.
skills as a dad that you want to say, hey, daughter, if something doesn't look right, and so I can understand. I think that's where your dad was coming from, because I got to tell you this. When my first daughter was born, Toni, and some of my friends, they snicker a little bit about it, but I remember wanting to be that protective dad. So when my first daughter was born, I remember I called a couple of my previous girlfriends, and I said, hey, I'm sorry. It was just kind of like, wow, now I have a daughter. And so, I wanted to make sure that I treat them okay. And just that I love them. And see, they had dads. So part of that was me checking myself like, okay, now you're a dad. Did you do something to embarrass their daughters, or did you treat them right and all of that stuff? So I say all that to say it is that.
That's incredible. Like, I've never heard a guy doing that before.
Oh,
wow.
Toni, it was because I just remember seeing my daughter and crying, and it was, okay, now I'm the dad now, and very quickly, because I want to get back to how you healed through this, but there were certain things, Toni, that I remember. One young lady that I dated, I remember one time I pulled up to her house and I blew the horn. I was taking her out.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I knew better. But I blew the horn, and her dad came out and said, no, we don't do that here. You come inside each time that you pick my daughter up. And so it was those types of experiences that, it was just this overwhelming sense that, wow, thank you to all of those dads out there who kind of checked me.
Yeah.
And so it was me kind of reaching out to people and saying, look, you know what? Wonderful time. Thank you. Sorry it didn't work out, but it was kind of a joyful thing that while it may not have worked out, I learned something from them in the process. And so it was kind of me releasing that and sharing some love backwards, if you will.
Right.
So in terms of your dad, you were able to get past that moment, but how did that affect you and your dad's relationship moving forward?
I think every relationship was complicated. My first marriage was complicated. And it was, I felt a lot of mistrust. I didn't feel completely comfortable and vulnerable with anyone for a really, really long time. And I drank. Yeah. when I wouldn't allow myself to feel pain. And that's what the alcohol did for me. It allowed me not to feel any pain.
Wow. Now, Tony, you mentioned that you had done this you had been drinking for over 30 years. Mm-hmm. Were there some other things that also contributed to the drinking piece that, later on you had to kind of come to grips with, like, who am I? Who is Tony? Because, knowing your background, you came from very successful parents.
Yeah.
You kind of had this expectation.
Yes.
It may not have been verbalized to you,
yes.
but I think, as kids, while parents don't mean to pass it on to us, there's a level of expectation that our kids think, you know what, man, I don't know if I can ever live up to mom. And your mom was, a producer, and she was a powerhouse. So how do you even carve out your own little Tony? How was that?
Well, that's such a great question, because I felt like when I started in television, which was around 1990, and my mom was working at the same station as I was, and she had her Emmys in her office. She already had won all these accolades. She was, and she was a producer. And what I did is I immediately knew that, yes, I wanted to be here, but I wanted to be different. And what I did is I took the road less traveled for women, number one, African-American women, number two, and I became a director and editor, which is a very, very technical part of television production. So what did that mean? It meant I was the boss. I get to boss people around. That was awesome. And, in editing and being able to kind of create someone's vision together. Yeah. And, but it was important for me not to be Cynthia. It was important for Tonia to be Tonia. And that was one of my goals. And you talked about the drinking and how did that kind of subside? It didn't. At the end of the day, I remember the morning of September 11th, 2001, and I was the first person in the newsroom and turned on all the, the TV monitors in the newsroom, and we saw the first hole in the South Tower. And I'm like, my gosh, and the reports were very, very, very preliminary at the time. And I saw the second one go in, and I immediately went into action mode, and I called my then father-in-law and I said, go get my kids from school. That was my first, just go pick them up now. And then just went into action. And at the end of the day, about 17 hours later, I remember leaving the control room and just falling on my knees and bawling. It went and got a huge bottle of vodka and did the next 4 nights, and just kind of dealing with it. It was alcohol. I always made room for it. Made room for it until I found out I couldn't make any more room for it, and we'll get to that. But for you, you know, you were always that communicator. You were always that person who was looking for stories. And so you leave you finish up, you have your first daughter. Where's your life now? What are you doing? What are your hopes? What are your dreams?
Well, it's interesting. My daughter was born in 2006. My first daughter. My second was the following year. But what had happened, it's beginning in around 2000, I become really interested in real estate. And, and even with the real estate, it wasn't so much about the houses. It was just communicating with people, wanting to find out where they want to stake roots, and hearing their stories and how a house in the neighborhood could move their lives forward. And so I had a ball with real estate. But what had happened, Tonia, is that in 2007-8, when the market had crashed, and again, I'm with 2 daughters now, wife, brownstone. I mean, it's life is good.
Yeah.
And then when the market crashed, I took such a financial hit. And I always tell people, back then, I did very well financially, and I always help people. If you needed something and I had it, I would always give with the expectation that I may not get it back.
Right.
And so I found myself on the receiving end, like, okay, wait a minute, the market's crashing. I can't sell any houses. I had a couple of houses that I owned, and it was just this big financial burden that came upon me. And I tell folks, I went from getting thank you notes hey, thank you for helping me buy a house. Thank you for helping me sell my home. And then, I came from getting thank you notes to judgment notices from creditors and mortgage companies about, hey, you're behind. And so that took a toll on me because, quite frankly, Tony, I didn't separate myself from the circumstances.
Wow.
And there's a difference.
Yes.
I am not one, and I remember going to my banker, one of my bankers at the time, and I said, look, hey, I hit a speed bump here. I had options to file bankruptcy and all of that, but my parents taught me, if you make a bill, you pay a bill. And so I didn't go the bankruptcy route. I said, well, look, if I have to pay you X amount of dollars per month, I'm going to pay you back. And so, so that taught me a lesson about, hey, look, you follow through on what you create. And so, for a while though, I could not separate my circumstances from who I was. So I was internalizing, oh, I'm such a bad person. All of these people knew I was a multi-million-dollar seller and an agent, and now look at me. And so I carried that because I had nothing to do with the market and where the mortgage industry was going, but I internalized that. And Tony, it really kind of hit its climax in about 2008, 2009 for me. And then lo and behold, in 2010, I was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And to this day, I am a firm believer in that the things that we carry internally have a way of finding some chink in the armor somewhere in the body to nest itself and manifest into something that does the body no good.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what happened after Miami and, coming back and, working. But then that 2009 period was the one that really did it for me. And by the grace of God, I was able to rebound from that, find work, get back up on my feet. But it was a very interesting period for me where I found out what I was made of again, because the first time was in Miami when I had to re-audition. But this was at another level because now I had family, I had a wife, I had kids, and mortgage, and all of that stuff, the car.
Yeah,
and
your dad, you're head of household. That
yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. And they're not expecting. Look, I've got to maintain this facade of holding it together,
Right.
and so that was tough. But by the grace of God, I mean, my family, my wife, I mean, she's the warrior. She was right there behind me, and yeah, we're gonna do this, and so that's what helped me through.
Yeah, I met my husband, Greg, and it was in 2010. I met my husband, and I was on a trip to the St. Thomas with my sister. We were just visiting my dad and family and everyone, and wasn't looking for anything at all. Just nothing, just hanging out, whatever. And here comes this 6'4" guy walking up into my life, and we both say like, oh, we knew immediately that this was something huge. And so, and when he met, I was drinking, and I think I was even smoking at that time, even though people don't know that, but they know that now.
Now they all know now.
Cigarettes. So, my husband he stopped drinking alcohol altogether, and I was still going hard. And then we tragically lost my husband's oldest daughter, Jamie. We lost her a few years ago. It was April 2017. And she passed away due to suicide. And I think at that point, my level of pain, for a couple of reasons, I couldn't take my husband's away, and that was painful. As a spouse, you want to be able to do that. There was no joy around us at that time, and not that there really had a space for it then. And so for me, it was, what the alcohol did is it allowed me to mask that pain. I didn't have to feel that pain. But what I realized is that God was sending something really, really important for me to understand, is that there was no level of alcohol that was going to fix this pain. So, I still went through several months, and then the drinking became more and more, and I knew I was out of control. I just didn't have it in me to stop. And my husband came home one day, and I was in the house, and I may have been slurring my words or maybe stumbling a little bit. I don't know what it was, but he went into my bedroom, he found my stash, and he just put it up on my nightstand. And I was like, okay, the gig is up. The gig is up. The next day, he came with me to go see my doctor. And, I just told my doctor, I said, I have a drinking problem. That was November 17th, 2017. And I haven't had a drop since.
Tony, though, let me back up for a second. So you had been doing it for all those years. I mean, but you were functional. Nobody knew otherwise. Highly functional.
Nobody knows. When I first talked openly about my drinking, jaws were dropping left and right. My mom cried because she had no idea. And my mom and I are incredibly close and have been forever. And no one knew. But I think what it was is that Greg was the first person in my life that I felt absolutely 100% vulnerable with. So he got through. He got into the real me, and he knew what was in there. He knew that, and he knew that the alcohol was only destroying everything that I was. And yes, I credit God for saving my life, but my goodness, my husband, had it not been for him, I think that I don't think I'd be sitting here right now. I'm not sure what would have happened, but his grace with me and him praying for me more than I pray for myself. And just knowing that it was right before Thanksgiving too. And I remember, and we always have this huge Thanksgiving thing. And I just told him I couldn't go. And so what did he do? We bought a turkey and we made our own Thanksgiving. And I'm going to start crying. I'm going to move my makeup right now. But it was that what I needed. And when I stopped drinking, we moved into our dream house. My daughter, who had been trying to get pregnant for months and months and months and kept having false positives and doing the in vitro and everything. And, it's positive, then it's negative and all this stuff. And I knew that at that point, God was saying, I am not putting a child in a car with you until you get your stuff together. So I quit drinking November 17, 2017. December 2017, my daughter was pregnant and my beautiful granddaughter, Autumn, was born 3 days before my birthday.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting, Tony, is sometimes we don't realize that a lot of times when God gets our attention and wants to put us on the right course, it has such a ripple effect to other parts of our families.
Yes.
And so, a lot of people will talk about, being blessed and, but the totality of the blessing, I think I wish people would understand more about, because when you get blessed, there are other people that begin to get blessed. And here was a classic example that God needed to get you taken care of first. And then he added everything
Say it again.
On top of that.
Say it again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
And so now you've gone through that. The drinking has, disappeared in terms of, you no longer had to hide that anymore. What has, you told me about the family and you've got the dream house, but has that also helped you identify what your purpose is in life now?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I say this as well, God has saved me from myself. So 30 years of drinking, never had a DUI, never hurt anyone, never hurt myself, never hit anything. The only person that I was hurting it was health-wise and emotionally was myself for drinking. Yeah. God was saving me from myself. He was saving me for something bigger. And I always feel as though that has been my purpose, to step out of my own head, if you will. You know what I mean? Because I can decide what Tony can and cannot do. God knows what Tony can and cannot do. And that has been my greatest glory in this, is just having a clarity and a confidence and a determination and a foundation, and seeking first the kingdom of God in every single thing I do. And, bringing this full circle, had I known then what I know now, man, you'd be watching me on every single news channel. Look what she did again, and look what she did again.
But Tony, that's the beauty of us growing a little older and also wiser in that, and we talked about this at the beginning. I think when you're younger, you think you know it all, know, and it's like, and I also have to be careful with my daughters in that, with them being 15 and 14, I'm finding my role as a parent. I'll always be a parent. However, I think I'm transitioning more to now a guide and a coach.
That's awesome.
At this stage in their lives. I think it's more guiding and coaching, because, we've done the diapers and all of that stuff and placing you here and taking you here and there. I forgot to add, guide, coach, and concierge because they just seem to want me to do everything.
Yeah.
But that's part of that growing experience that when I look at where we came from in terms of Miami, as parents, I look at that now and say, we have to be careful about still parenting at that stage and just being more of a guide and a coach. Because now that gives our kids a little bit of flexibility to grow, and they don't have to be like mom and dad, but we guide them through. And so I just look at your story and how, coming from Miami to where you are now, how you've just been blessed, and what's interesting to hear the story of a storyteller. That's awesome to me, you know. But for the longest time, you didn't tell it.
Right.
You told everybody else's stories.
That's right. That's right.
And
you as well, because you were always that guy that had a really great good morning for you, good afternoon, how you doing, and all of that. And you fast forward, yes, it's been 34 years, ladies and gentlemen.
I know.
Yes, I know it's been 34 years, but you still have that. And I think that that's just such a great testament to your energy in who you are. And I just wonder, like, where did you get that from, and how have you been able to kind of keep that through all these years?
Well, I've got to admit, and through some soul searching, I knew I was supposed to be doing something like this when I was about 3 or 4 years old, quite honestly. Sitting at the knee of my dad while he was playing all of his Blue Note jazz records, and, watching Johnny Carson and all of these shows that, they always involve people, and the music was kind of the stirring of the soul. So I knew when I was a child that's kind of the path for me. But for the longest time, Tony, I didn't feel like that was a worthy endeavor. I thought maybe, I was very good in science when I was in high school, and my teachers and even a couple of my college professors before I went to Miami, they thought I should be pre-med. And while I did well academically in the sciences, it wasn't where my heart was, but I was masking, being this communicator, this talker who wants to bring people together, because, for the most part, the way we grew up, a lot of times when a person talked a lot, what did they say? Oh, he's so full of jive, or she's so full of jive. They just talk. And, and so it's never looked at as something, or at least back then, it wasn't looked at as something as an asset. And I kid Billy Abels, we talked about him earlier about connecting people. That's a ministry for him.
Yes.
Because he's really able to connect people from all over the world and say, hey, do you remember such and such? And he brings people together. And I always tell him, that's a ministry. And so over the past couple of years, I've finally, Tony, been able to accept this and say, you know what, this is what I do. I tell stories, I connect people, I try to inspire people. And you know what? That's who I am. Instead of trying to find or nail down that particular career because it looks nice in the eyes of others. I had some unmasking, if you will. A friend of mine has a ministry called Unmasked. And so I had to do that myself. I had to, take that off and say, hey, this is who I am. And at my age now, Tony, all I want to be is Robert Ginyard. And that does it for me. So I'll ask you, and you mentioned about you're operating in your purpose now. What would you say to the 20-year-old Tony if you had an opportunity to whisper in her ear, given your experiences and everything that you've learned and all that you've gone through, what would you whisper in her ear?
Oh, that's just such an amazing question. And I'm so glad that you asked it, because one of the things that I do every single day when I wake up and I come down to my office, I read Marianne Williamson's Our Deepest Fear. And it's a poem that, had I had it back then, I really think things would have been very different for me. But when I found it, I knew how to stand in my space and demand that my space is mine, and it didn't belong to anyone. And I'll just read a couple of lines from it. It says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. So that is, and it goes on. And I will put a link on this on my webpage, because I really think that it's just, we are our only obstacles. God knows what we can do, and so when that first line, our deepest fear is that we are inadequate. And that's just so true. And so once you can step out of that and say, yeah, no, I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid if I succeed, or I'm not afraid if I fall. It's part of the process. And that was something that I wish I had back then, that this fear of not living up to my mom and her successes, this fear of not being good enough, not being smart enough, not being pretty enough, not being all those messages that, and I didn't learn them from anyone. I just convinced myself that they were there. And that's what I would tell my 20-year-old self, is that you are beyond measure, and you will continue to be beyond measure, because that's the space that I stand in now.
Yeah. Wow. Well, one of the poems that I always refer to is A Dream Deferred. And I remember, to me, it hit home because I'm a firm believer in dreams. You talked about finding your dream home and everything that fell upon you to really bless you. And I'm a big believer in dreams. And I do think that the achievement of dreams is important to our health as well, important to our health. And, I can see where if you don't achieve some dreams, it will tear you apart. And the poem goes on to talk about that, how a dream deferred really starts to eat away at you.
And dries up like a raisin in the sun.
Right.
Festers like a sword, then run. Yeah.
Exactly. We've
been taught these poems in our lives.
Yes, right. But they make sense once you've lived a little.
Yes.
To say, oh, I get it now. Yes. And so I would say that one of the things that I wish I would have done is been like you. I think I probably would have been more confident in my abilities and really stepped out. But I'll say this. I think sometimes our faith tells us, or at least the way we interpreted it when we were younger, you pray and you're a little meek, and you just kind of, oh, God will bless me when it's my time. But we're also, if we're an extension of God, so we have that power, we have that ability to step into His grace and just really maximize all that He gives us. And so I've realized over the years now, I have more power in the Word than I had when I was younger, because I was just kind of a passive person in terms of following the Lord. But now that I'm older, I'm like, I always subscribe to the African proverb. It says, pray and move your feet, meaning that pray, but then get busy. Yes. Get busy living and doing it. And so that's my big lesson that I've learned over the years.
Number one, I think we need to do this again. We're running out of time now, but I think that this has just been a great conversation with two people who really haven't connected in 34 years, and we're kind of just picking up where we left off. So, as we sit here and we have so much more living to do, tell me, what is a dream, if you will, that you may have deferred, and now it's time to to get it done?
My dream is I've got 2 books on my plate right now that I need to finish. And that's always been a dream of mine, to be able to encourage and inspire people, to help them reach their highest heights. And so that's where my dream is. And I just thank God that now I'm able to walk in it. And so, I'm praying and moving my feet. I'm dreaming, believe it, do it, be it, dibby,
Yes.
that's me. So that's where I am. And so now I'll ask you, what is that dream or some dreams that you are ready to pursue? Or if you're not pursuing it, what is it for you now?
Well, my big dream this year, and it came out of prayer, was to start my second film. And so I am working with this extraordinary group of women. And I've started production on a film called More Than Our Skin. And it's about, it focuses on this group of women who live with vitiligo. Vitiligo is a disease that attacks the pigmentation in your skin.
Yes.
And people will know it in reference to Michael Jackson. I mean, I think that's one of the more prominent spaces, but the emotional and the mental and physical turmoil that these women go through, their stories haven't been told. And so I am in it right now. I dreamed it, and I'm believing it, and I'm doing it right now. And so I'm in this dream right now. And so we have already started production, and I think after that, I just want to continue to do films. There's so many stories out there that I want to be able to tell. And I'm just so unbelievably blessed. I thank God every single day for the talents that He's given me so that I'm able to do this.
Amen. Well, Tony, like you, I'm glad our paths crossed. And I'm just amazed at how life can bring you back full circle. And so, no, it was no mistake meeting you in 1986. And just to be able to be here in this space in this time right now in 2021 is a blessing. And, I just wish our blessings on many of our other friends. And this has been great. I've enjoyed this.
This has been awesome. And I mean it. We should do this again. And maybe we can invite some other UN people with us.
That's not a bad idea. Let's do that. Yeah, we can invite Bill. But yeah, I think it would be wonderful just to see how everybody's been blessed. And, there's some stories that we all have to tell. And I think we've got a good group of people we can draw on.
Well, thank you, Robert Ginyard from Intentionally Overheard. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
And thank you, Tonia Magras, for the Power Play. And thank you for having me on your show.
What a great conversation. Robert, thank you again so much for this. This has really been something else. Remember, you can listen to the Power Play show wherever you subscribe to podcasts, including iTunes, iHeartRadio, and now Pandora Podcasts. And you can also watch us on our YouTube channel. Simply search the Hull Bay Productions Media channel. And we air each and every Saturday at 5 p.m. on BroncoIRadio.com. So there's so many ways to catch the Power Play. And if you've missed any of those, you can just always visit us at thepowerplayshow.com. Until next time, I am your host of the Power Play Show, Tonia Magras. Put on a mask, stay safe, and take care of one another.